Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our summer intensive Tahara sessions. Inshallah, uh, during this week, we will be focusing in on purification, which is Tahara. It will be kind of like an introduction to Tahara. At the same time, it will be an intensive. So there's a lot of information that is going to be discussed in these sessions that can be taught over an entire semester or a longer period of time. But we will condense this. The purpose of this is so that people who are not able to dedicate a longer time period, they can just attend these 4 or 5 sessions and get the same amount of information. Now, what I will do is record these sessions. So if you happen to miss one, you can catch up. If you didn't understand something, you can go back to it and listen to it once or twice. It will help listening to these sessions, even if you understood everything a second time, just to solidify anything that you possibly missed. Now, I did invite many of the new Muslim people who attended the new Muslim sessions to join this session, with the disclaimer that this is a more intense session. This will be covering a lot more topics, although it is not considered an intermediate level or even an advanced level class or course. It is still a beginner course, but it will be a lot more detailed than what we discussed during the New Muslim Week. With that being said, if any new Muslims are taking this class and they feel overwhelmed, feel free to pause at that time and just take a break from it. It could be a lot of information at once. And also don't go into these sessions thinking that you will walk away with everything that is being discussed here in the first try. Now, there are some people that might be taking this session that we offered in person previously at the Dover Masjid. We've offered it for multiple years now in person, and usually over the span of 1 week or 2 weeks. This year we're doing 1 week. If you've taken this before, it will be a good refresher. You'll notice that there will be discussions that will come up during this time that you might have missed previously as well. And because it is only a week long, it won't be something that you're spending an immense amount of time with, even if you've taken it before. It serves as a refresher. If you're taking this for the first time, just know that there's going to be a lot of information discussed in a short period of time. Each one of these sessions is 1 hour. Our goal will be to complete this entire Tahara portion of it, which is this week's intensive, by Thursday. If we don't finish by Thursday, Friday is included in one of the dates that we've given. We said Monday to Friday, but Friday is a fallback date. It's there in case these discussions prolong and we don't finish it within 4 days. So our goal will be to tackle this subject within 4 days. Like I said, if we don't manage to finish it in 4 days, we'll use our 5th and final day, which is Friday. If we do manage to finish it, you can have Friday off, inshallah. So we'll determine it based on how it goes during these next few days. At the very end, we will have a short quiz. And this quiz will just be mostly true or false, just to see and refresh and allow your mind to kind of remember some of the things that were discussed during the week. So the way that I usually do this is I'll have my fiqh notes displayed. Well, this is the first time we're doing it online, but usually we pass out the fiqh notes for people to have either on their devices or printed versions. We usually give out printed versions when you walk in. I know some of you might have taken this previously, so you're familiar with walking in the classroom, and we already have the pamphlets printed out. Now, these pamphlets that we will be using, or this pamphlet that we will be using, is in note format. So it is structured as somebody's class notes. It's my notes that I wrote up for this class, but the style that it's structured in is not a textbook or a reading material style. So if somebody were to read these without having somebody explain what's going on, they will not understand it. At times, it could possibly even confuse the person. That's why they go alongside these discussions in these classes. So it's just there to summarize for you what we are discussing. You can also take your own notes further elaborating on those points. But if you don't want to take your notes, we will have it on screen, my class notes for these sessions. Like I said, inshallah, our goal will be to cover this in 4 days, Monday to Thursday. Still keep Friday open just in case we don't finish it. We will use Friday as well. This week, we will be focusing on Tahara, purification. Next week, we will focus on Salah, prayer. Now, these sessions will start with ideally what a general or typical fiqh book, the books of Islamic law, starts talking about Tahara and then starts talking about those things that you can use for Tahara. It will be structured as a mas'ala formula or mas'ala method, which is it'll bring up a topic or a question, and then we will discuss that and break down the rulings surrounding that. So let me begin by sharing the introduction with you, sharing my screen actually. Please let me know when you can see my screen. All right, Jazakallah khair, perfect. Is this better? Maybe this is better to view. I can just scroll. Okay, that should be better. All right. Ideally, what we will do is today we are going to start with an introduction. In our next week's session, we won't repeat this introduction. So those that are exclusively taking next week's session, we'll just tell them to go back to this video and watch the beginning portion of this. The introduction will break down two things. Number one, it'll just give us an overview of Islamic law or fiqh. And then number two, it will break down the categories of actions or the different categories that we have under Islamic law. So that's going to be part of the introduction. Today we will finish the introduction and we'll also get into the Tahara, the beginning of Tahara as well. Like I said, this is an intensive, so it will have more information than a typical class. It is still a very basic level class, so it's not going into details to a very or it'll go into details, but to a very limited extent. We can say that. So number one, introduction. Number one is Sharia or Islamic law. Now the Sharia consists of the easiest definition for the Sharia is everything that is divinely sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent through his religion. For us in Islam, everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent through the religion of Islam. Now, this consists of those things that a person is required to believe in. So a person is required to believe in God, the prophets, the angels, the previous books, the previous messengers, the day of judgment. These are elements of faith, pillars of Iman. This is a component of the Sharia. Another component of the Sharia is akhlaq, Islamic morals, values, the way that we our outlook on life, our interactions with other people, how we treat them. Now, this can sometimes overlap with another component of Sharia, which is known as fiqh. Fiqh are Islamic rules. They're rules and regulations. They are the rules that pertain to, or you can say, pertain to physical actions in Islam. Now, for those that have taken our previous spring session, which was an introduction to Islamic law, it's still available online on YouTube. It's, I believe, 10 classes that goes through an introduction to Islamic law, and it covers and breaks down in detail what Islamic law is. It talks about fiqh, it talks about the development of fiqh and all of that in detail. But our goal here is to understand that the Sharia is everything that is sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it consists of those things that pertain to beliefs, those things that pertain to morals and ethics, and those things that pertain to rules and regulations, physical rules and regulations, or rules and regulations that pertain to our physical conduct. That third one, or what's on the screen as number 2, is known as fiqh. Fiqh is Islamic law. Now, sometimes this word fiqh and Islamic law, this category, sometimes the word sharia is used to talk about specifically this category. So in essence, you can say sharia has 2 definitions. One is a general definition that encompasses all of these categories that we talked about. So when somebody says the pillars of iman, that's part of sharia. And then we can say a second definition that confines the meaning of sharia to fiqh. So sometimes it's used interchangeably as the word fiqh. So when somebody says the sharia, they're talking about Islamic law, rules and regulations. So both of these definitions are perfectly fine. It depends on the usage. Our class is going to be on fiqh. We are talking about Islamic rules and regulations. We're talking about, this week, we're going to be talking about the rules and regulations that deal with tahara, cleanliness, purification. How do we purify or clean ourselves to be in a ritual purity state for worship, which allows us to pray, allows us to touch the Quran, allows us to do our ritualistic acts of worship. Next week's class, we'll talk about one specific subject of worship, which is salah, prayer. It is one of the 5 pillars of Islam as well. But today, what we will learn contains a lot of the prerequisites of prayer. So in order for you to pray, you need wudu. In order for you to do wudu, you have to understand the rules and regulations that surround wudu, the rules and regulations that surround taking a shower, right? When somebody is in a major state of impurity, how does one cleanse themselves from that situation or state? Another thing that we will delve into, or other things that we will delve into, are what about wiping on your socks? So what about wiping on your shoes and these topics? What about if you have a cast? What about if you don't have water? What if you can't use water? So all of these questions will be answered during these sessions, inshallah. And ideally, at the end of each session, we will have some time for Q&A as well. But you can keep putting your questions in the chat box, and we'll try to get to them at the end or at any stopping point that we find to be reasonable during these sessions. So that is an overview of the word sharia and the word fiqh. Now, where does sharia or fiqh come from? There are 4 major sources of fiqh, of Islamic law, of the sharia. We're using these words interchangeably: sharia, fiqh, Islamic law. In essence, we're using them to mean the same thing pretty much. Number 1, the first source of Islamic law is the Quran, the holy book of Muslims. This is the first source, the highest source, the most important source of Islamic law. Our first place of rules and regulations is the Quran. Now, the Quran itself is not a legal document. So the Quran is not a book of fiqh, right? A book of fiqh is more so of a code that, it talks about the different rules and regulations that pertain to your daily lives. It talks about, how to pray, what is the breakdown of prayer, how to give zakah, what is the breakdown of zakah. It talks about marital laws. It talks about, issues of government. It talks about anything that pertains to the realm of Islamic law. The Quran itself is a book of guidance. Now, some parts of the Quran will talk about legal rulings and legal injunctions. Some parts of the Quran will talk about moral upliftment. Some parts of the Quran will talk about a spiritual realm, spiritual upliftment. So the Quran consists of things that are greater and beyond the realm of fiqh, the realm of Islamic law. It is not a legal document. However, the most important source of our legal code is the Quran itself. The second source is the Sunnah. This is the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ. What did the Prophet ﷺ, or how, did the Prophet ﷺ understand the Quran? How did he give us rulings in terms of our daily living? How did the Prophet ﷺ pray? So we know in the Quran, prayer is an obligation. The exact details of how to pray are not present in the Quran. Rather, they are from the second source, which is the Sunnah. How exactly did the Prophet pray? This comes from the Sunnah. So if a person only looks at exclusively the first source, they won't get a comprehensive understanding of prayer. Um, it doesn't mention the order of prayer. It does mention the components of prayer. So in the Quran, it mentions do sajda, which is prostration, do ruku, which is the bowing position. It mentions these positions, but it doesn't mention the order. The order is understood by the way the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may peace and blessings be upon him, prayed. The third source is ijma'. Now, this source is a scholarly consensus. When the legal scholars get together and they determine that this is the correct understanding of the Sunnah or the correct understanding of the Quran, and they're in agreement that this is part of Islamic law. The fourth source is analogy, legal analogy. So if something is prohibited based on a certain reason, if that reason is found in something else, that something else is prohibited as well. For example, alcohol is prohibited because it intoxicates. Anything that intoxicates then is also prohibited because the same legal reasoning is found in the prohibition of alcohol. So, cocaine or any sort of hard drugs would be prohibited based on this analogy as well. There are also other reasons from the other sources like the Sunnah that mention that anything that intoxicates is prohibited as well. But this is just one example of analogy. So these are the different sources of Islamic law, right? From these sources, you arrive at Islamic law. Now, obviously, we are not turning directly to the sources. That has already been done by the legal scholars. The legal scholars over time, over 1400 years, from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have been giving us the instructions of how to do these things. So at the time of the Prophet would give these instructions, explain the Quran. After the Prophet, the companions of the Prophet would say, the Prophet ﷺ did it this way. God in the Quran says this. These are the legal injunctions. These are the rulings. This is how you do this. After that, the next generation of righteous individuals and scholars and legal scholars, fuqaha, the scholars of Islamic law or the scholars of fiqh, delved into the same inquiries and extracted Islamic law, right? Extracted legal codes, extracted the how-tos from these sources. So for us, what we, especially at a very starting level, the first step is to look at the books of fiqh, and learn our how-tos from those books, how to do wudu, how to take a ghusl, how to pray, right? These rulings. Then if you want to become or you want to delve deeper, you would move from a beginning level text to an intermediate level text. This is a beginning level course. You would move from intermediate to expert level. Before you even move up, though, each time when you're at a beginning level, at times you would be required to go through those texts multiple times to solidify those things in your mind. And when you do a beginning level text, for the most part, it does not trace you back to, the original sources. So it's not going to tell you that you do this way because A, B, C, D, these are the legal reasonings, because it's going to confuse the person who is starting. When you move on to an intermediate level text, it starts to introduce where these things are from, what sources. Like today, we're just talking about the sources in general, but then it starts delving into why you do this. It starts delving into the nuances of it. It starts delving into the differences within the traditions that are found. And then when you move to an expert level, it goes beyond that and starts getting into the very minor details of how it's understood. What are the different scholars? What views do they hold on this issue? And starts getting into the debating aspect of it. But obviously, we don't want to jump there. Our goal is going to be trying to understand the rules. Let's get the rules down first. Now, aside from these sources, there are other sources, but these are the four major sources of Islamic law. And from all of these sources, we get our fiqh. And this fiqh that we have received, this is what our course will be going through. Before we begin Tahara, we will also do one more thing, which is the hukm taklifi, or the categories of actions, you can say, the categories of where do you categorize each action. When you have these sources of Islamic law that we just discussed, you then receive all of these things. You receive things that are prohibited. You look at the sources, or scholars look at the sources, and they say, well, based on these sources of Islamic law, we determine that it is prohibited to eat pork, right? Because in the Quran it says you can't eat pork, right? It's from the Islamic sources. Now, eating pork, you take that action, the action of eating pork, and you categorize it somewhere. In this case, it's categorized as a prohibition. It's categorized as something that is prohibited or something that is haram. You can look at something else, drinking water. Where do we categorize that? So every single action is now categorized in these categories that we will discuss. I'm going to share my screen again. 1 second. This is a slide that we used for or during our Islamic law class. Let's share the same thing again. 1 second, I might have to close this one. All right, how about now? Is it different? Should be a blue slide. Defining law. Hukum taklifi. Can you see it? Okay, alhamdulillah. So these are the categories. We're looking at 7 categories. I don't want you to pay too much attention to the white and yellow. That was more so of a breakdown that we were using for a different class. But today we just want to understand there's 7 categories at most that scholars categorize it in. Just as a reference, so the blue and yellow doesn't confuse you, some scholars categorize it as 5 categories. So they take all these actions and either put it in one of 5. Some scholars take these actions and put it in one of 7. As you'll see, the 2 extra are not very different from the 5 that are there. They're just a nuanced difference between some of them. So the first category that you have, and we can even think of it, instead of a hierarchy, we can think of it as a scale, right? Which side, or as a spectrum, which side of the spectrum it's going to be on. So think of it as the first one is fard or wajib. This category, which is fard or wajib, are those things that you have to do. This is an obligation. So the scholars will look at the sources of Islamic law and say prayer, or the 5 daily prayers. Where does it go in these categories? We're going to put it in fard. The reason we put it in fard, the Quran commands it. The hadith tell us that these are the pillars of Islam. This is something you have to do. It's not optional. It's something you have to do. So the first category, which is fard/wajib, and the second category, which is wajib, they're very similar in terms of their ruling. The ruling is if you perform something, if you do something that is categorized as an obligation, you are rewarded. If you don't do it, if it's not performed, you are sinful. So you have P for performed and P for not performed. Performed, R stands for rewarded. You can screenshot this as well. And R stands for not rewarded. S stands for sinful and S not sinful. So here, if you perform something that is wajib, you are rewarded. If you don't perform something that is an obligation, something that's fard or wajib, you are sinful. The next category, we're going to jump to number 3. We said number 1 and 2, think of it as the same thing. Fard, wajib, similar, right? Similar ruling. But there's some differences that we will, when we're discussing the rulings, I'll explain them. So they'll come along with time. But in terms of its ruling, it's similar. In terms of certain differences that can extend from there, you'll start to notice the differences as we discuss our Tahara sessions. Number 3, sunnah or mandub. This is this category here. So we had the first category of fard, then you have wajib next to it. Then next to it, you have sunnah or mandub. This is a category that is known as recommended. These actions are good to do. They're recommended to do. If you do them, you are rewarded. If you don't do them, you're not sinful for the most part. So you're recommended to do it. If you do it, you get reward. If you don't do it, you're not sinful. Now, there's a small nuance here that if you never do something that is sunnah, prophetic sunnah, never do it at all, then you could possibly be sinful as well. But that's, not our discussion. We want to keep everything at a very basic level here. The next category, sometimes it's not even a category, it's just a neutral category, which means it's mubah, it's permissible. So there's no reward attached to it, there's no sin attached to it. If you do it, there's no reward. If you don't do it, there's no sin. The next category is makruh, which is disliked. This category is something that is disliked, something that's discouraged. You shouldn't do it. This category, if a person does something that is disliked, they're not sinful. If they don't do it when they had the opportunity to do so, they are rewarded. So if you stay away from something disliked and you had, you were in a situation or a position that you were about to do it and you stayed away, you are rewarded. The last two categories have the same ruling. So makruh tahrimi is similar to haram. It's not similar to makruh. It's closer to haram. Makruh tahrimi and haram are those things that are prohibited, right? Those things that are prohibited. If you do it, then you are sinful. If you do it, you're sinful. If you don't do it, you're rewarded. If you stay away from it, you are rewarded. But if you do it, you are sinful. Now, let's look at some of these examples. And the reason why I'm bringing the examples at the end is just to go through these categories again to give you a chance to solidify it in your mind. The first category that we have is fard. We said fard, if you do something that's fard, an obligation, you get reward. If you don't do it, you're sinful because it's an obligation on you. You have to do it. This is like Salatul Fajr, right? Salatul Fajr, if we pray it, we're rewarded. If we don't pray it, we're sinful. Ramadan fast, the fast of Ramadan. If we fast in Ramadan, we're rewarded. If we don't fast in Ramadan, we're sinful. Hijab, right? If a person wears it, they are rewarded. If they don't wear it, they would be sinful. The next category is wajib, or fard and wajib we said is the same, but you can look at some of the nuanced differences, Fatiha and prayer, witr prayer, and we'll talk about this, especially these two examples, during our sessions on salah, on prayer. That what happens when you leave something that is wajib versus if you leave something that is fard by accident, right? There's a difference in outcome. Let's go to the category of sunnah and mandub. We said this category is recommended, something good to do. If you do something that is sunnah or mandub, you are rewarded. If you don't do it, you're not sinful, right? You're not held accountable for that action. Such as fasting Monday or Thursday. On a casual Monday or Thursday, not in Ramadan, on a casual Monday or Thursday, it is sunnah to fast. If I were to fast with the intention of that sunnah, I would be rewarded. So I'm doing an action. We look at fasting on Monday and Thursday. We say, okay, we're categorizing this in sunnah. If I do it, I'm rewarded. If I don't do it, if I didn't fast, today's Monday. If I didn't fast today, I'm not sinful. If I did fast today, I am rewarded. The mubah category. This category is permissible, neutral. If you do it, you're not sinful. If you don't do it, you're not sinful. You're not rewarded. There's nothing attached to it. It's just a neutral category. Like drinking coffee. If I drink coffee, I'm not rewarded for it, nor am I sinful for it. Now, there are certain things that are in this category that can fall in the other categories because of an intention attached to it, for example. So if let's say it was 12 a.m. right now, and I say to myself, you know what, I'm going to drink coffee so I can stay up and read Quran. That drinking coffee, because it's accompanied by a good intention, becomes rewarding. So initially or originally, that drinking of coffee is permissible. It's not rewarded, nor is it sinful. However, because my intentions made something good attached to it, or something good was attached to it through my intention, right? I drank coffee for a good intention, I am rewarded because of that intention. Same thing goes if you do something sinful with it, right? If you do something sinful with it. So something might be permissible, but if you do it with the intention that maybe this will eventually harm somebody, right? If you do it with some sort of sinister intention, then that thing becomes disliked or haram or prohibited, depending on the level of it and depending on the possibility of harm that it can cause somebody else. So your intention can change something from this category and put it in something else, but because of it being accompanied by a good or a bad intention. The next category, makruh tanzihi, or just general makruh. This is something that is disliked, we said. And we said if you perform or do something that is disliked, you're not sinful. But if you stay away from it, you are rewarded. This is like looking around in prayer. So let's say I have a bad habit of when I'm praying, I just constantly look around. like this. And we're not talking about moving your body. We're just talking about looking around. This is something that's disliked. If I do it, I'm not going to be sinful. But if I avoid it, if I catch myself looking around and like, you know what, let me stop, let me focus, I am rewarded for leaving something that is disliked. The last two, makruh tahrimi and haram. These categories, if you do it, you are sinful, right? If you do something that Allah categorizes as haram, you are sinful. If you leave it when you have the opportunity, not when you constantly put yourself in the position to do it, but when you had the opportunity, you stayed away from it, or when the situation, put you in a position where it was in front of you and you stayed away from it, you are rewarded. For example, eating pork is haram. If you go and eat pork, you are sinful, right? That's categorized as haram. If you do an action that is haram, you are sinful. If, let's say, you are at a dinner or somewhere and somebody pours alcohol in everybody's cup and you stayed away from it, you didn't drink it, you are rewarded. Now, obviously, if you go out of your way to find places where they're serving you alcohol, then the same rule doesn't apply. You're not rewarded for putting yourself in that situation. So that breaks down the hukum taklifi, the categories of actions that we have. Everything that we will discuss during the Tahara session and Salah session, we will talk about one of these categories. We'll say these things are mandatory to do. Because they're mandatory, as we discussed, if you don't do it, you're sinful. If you do it, you're rewarded. We'll talk about these things are disliked. And when we say these actions are disliked when you're doing wudu, we know the ruling is, well, it's not going to break my wudu because I'm not sinful, because it's disliked. But if I leave these actions, I'm rewarded. That's why we're going through these categories. The way that the class is structured, we will see it is going to be structured through these categories. It's going to be telling us that our actions will fall under one of these categories. All right, if you have any questions at this point, feel free to put it in the chat. We're going to go back to our original document, which is what we will be using for the class itself, our fiqh notes. That's what it's called. All right. Can you see my screen again? All right, Jazakallah khair. So we did the introduction, we did what Islamic law was, we did the sources of Islamic law, we did the different categories. As I mentioned, that's not our main discussion, but it's just an intro to these Tahara and Salah discussions that we will be having. If you want more detail on Islamic law, there are about 9 or to 10 videos. The 10th one is our quiz or exam that we did during the spring. We did it weekly. They are about, I want to say, an hour or two. I don't remember off the top of my head. If somebody remembers, they can type it in the chat. Long. So if you're interested in that, I believe it's an hour. If you're interested in that, you can go through those 10 videos, and that breaks down Islamic law. So now let's go into the chapter of Tahara, purification. Tahara, let's do this. There are two types of purifications in Islam. One is a spiritual purification. This is the realm of spirituality. This is the realm of a non-physical purification, such as purifying your heart from greed, purifying your heart from hatred, purifying your heart from envy, jealousy. That is a spiritual purification. That is a very important component of our religion as well, to spiritually purify oneself. That you need to be constantly working on your inner self, right? It's not simply that you do the physical acts of worship. You pray, you give zakah, you fast. Those are all important parts of Islam as well. At the same time, there is a spiritual purification as well. We know many spiritual sins, or many, not spiritual sins, but many sins that pertain to the heart, right? Diseases of the heart, such as hatred if acted upon, such as greed if acted upon. These are diseases that are found within the human heart that if a person does not control, if a person does not work on these things, they can ruin a person and take that individual to destruction. So there's a spiritual purification, a spiritual element that a person has to go through as well. Now, without diverting too much, for those that are interested, there are a few good books on spiritual purification. There's one, I think it's called Purification of the Heart. I think it's translated by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. I don't remember the publisher, but if you type in Purification of the Heart by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, it's there. It's an original book written in Arabic, but he translates it and he has notes with it, and I think he has lectures online regarding it as well. And there are other spiritual purification books as well. Again, very important to read at least one of these types of books and start working on oneself. Another type of purification in our religion is a physical purification. Now, Islam emphasizes physical purification. There are details of our hygiene that we directly get from the Prophet ﷺ, like cleaning one's teeth, right? Cleaning one's mouth. This is a tradition that goes back to the Prophet ﷺ, brushing one's teeth multiple times throughout the day, making sure that a person does not have bad breath, combing one's hair, to the minor details. To the extent that we know that a person shouldn't come to prayer if their breath smells like garlic or like onion. These things are, deterrents for other people, for angels. That it harms the people that are around you. So a person should be conscious and aware of the effect that they have or their body odor has on the people that are surrounding them. This is the physical purification. Our subject this week, or Kitab al-Tahara, or the chapter of Tahara, deals with physical purification. Most books of fiqh, most books of Islamic law, when you open it, the first discussions or the first chapter is this subject here, Tahara, purification. And that is because in order for one to do most, or at least the most important act of worship, which is salah, one must purify themselves. And if one didn't need this purification, the first chapter would generally be salah because it's the single most important act of worship. But because we need to purify ourselves, we need to be in a state of purification in order for us to pray. Kitab al-Tahara is the first thing discussed, that this is important for a person to be in this state of cleanliness, purification. And then Kitab al-Salat, the act of prayer, that is the second thing. And that's why our course, we're having 1 week intensive on Tahara, and then we're going to do 1 week intensive on Salah. And it's in that order for that reason. And also it's separated for those that only want one of them, that only that might have taken this before, or that just want to refresh one of them. So 2 types of purification: spiritual, physical. This chapter, this class, this course, these sessions will deal with this physical purification. The first mas'ala, or the first issue that we are talking about, is dealing with water itself. What types of water can be used for tahara, can be used for this purification? By the way, if you see any typos, let me know. I can change it. This is a PDF, but I have the editable document as well. So what types of water can be used for tahara? This is not an exhaustive list. This is just giving you a general idea. Rainwater, yes, you can use water that falls out of the sky. Obviously, what's not on this list is tap water, right? That's a given. You can use the water in your sink, unless it's corrupted by something. But generally, for wudu, for most situations, for us, we just go to the sink in the bathroom, or if you're at the masjid wudu area, and just use the water that's coming out of the tap, you're good to go. But these are examples of other types of waters or other sources of water which you can use for making wudu. So rainwater. Rainwater might not be that much of an issue because it falls out, you can put a bucket, you can use it, whatnot. Like I said, this is not going to be your typical situation. Number 2, ocean water. Now this might be something new or something to think about for some people, because ocean water is salty, right? So it's not the same as your tap water. You can't really drink a lot of ocean water. I'm not sure how much ocean water will kill you, but you can't really drink ocean water. You can't drink water that's that salted. However, you can use it for wudu. Ocean water is considered tahir. It's considered purified water for the purposes of purification, for the purposes of tahara. Um, Number three, river water, flowing water in the river. You can use that. Number four, well water. Number five, melted snow or hail. Right, this is similar to rain. Obviously, it changes form into this water form. Number six, spring water. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just giving you an idea of different sources of water that you can use to do wudu. Like I said, most cases you're using your sink to do wudu. But now you know if you're at the beach, you are able to use the ocean to do wudu. You don't need to go to the tap because the ocean is salty or anything of that sort. Okay. The next thing we're going to discuss are the qualities of water. This is important to understand because based on the qualities of water, we will build up scenarios and understand how water changes from its original source, or what's considered changed water that you can no longer use for wudu or for purification. So water generally has three qualities: smell, taste, and color. These are the three qualities of water in Islamic law. It has a smell, a taste, color. Um, that's all this it is for this part, but now we're going to the next one. Number four, if something najas, which means impure, mixes with the water, right? What's the situation? So remember, I said this is the breakdown of this fiqh session is based on question format or mas'ala format. So the first mas'ala, or this mas'ala that we are doing, is if something impure mixes with the water, what's the outcome? Can we use that water? Can we not use the water? What's the situation? Situation one, if any of the three qualities of water that we just mentioned changes, you cannot use the water. Now remember, I want us to kind of computerize this in our minds. This is all under the category if something impure mixes, not something pure, something najas, something that is impure Islamically mixes in the water. To give you an example, something impure would be urine. Something impure would not be mud or dirt, right? So this is an important differentiation. Impure Islamically doesn't necessarily mean it is clean or dirty. It's like, for example, if I were to go outside and roll around in the dirt, right? I would be dirty, but I'm not Islamically impure. Okay, so there's a difference. So I would be dirty, and let's say I need to pray and I don't have the time to go shower and change my clothes and all of that. I can pray in that because it's not impure. It's dirty, and you definitely don't want to go into the masjid with that. And if that's going to dirty the carpet, then you're probably not even recommended to go in the masjid. You should pray outside. But if I'm in that situation for some odd reason, I'm not impure, I'm just dirty. It's dirt. Um, when we say impure, this is talking about what is considered Islamically impure. Now, let's say I fall in a puddle of urine, right? That's impure. I cannot pray in that. So this first mas'ala, this first scenario or situation is if something impure mixes with the water, not anything, something impure specifically. Um, what happens? What's the outcome? We said if any of the three qualities of that water changes, you can't use it. Because the item that mixed in was impure, if any of the three qualities, we said the smell, taste, or color changes, any of those three, you can't use that water, right? You can't use it. That's a very simple rule. Something impure, water mixed together, one of the three qualities changed, you can't use that water. Now, what happens if two of these qualities change? What do you think? You can answer in the chat box. Can you use the water? Let's say two of these qualities change. So let's say something impure, let's say urine was mixed in this body of water. We had a swimming pool and urine mixed in it, or we had this pond and urine mixed in it, and then all of a sudden the smell of the pond smells like urine, and I don't want to say somebody tasted it, but the color is like yellowish. Can you use that for wudu? This is where I need you to kind of puzzle this together. That's why we're learning this. Um, in a mas'ala format. So now puzzle what we learned together and give me an outcome. Can we use it if two things changed here? Yes or no? I have one no. If it changes the water, then no, no. Got another no? Okay, that is correct. Remember, we said if any of the qualities change, then you can't use it. So it doesn't matter if it's one quality, two qualities, or three. Because the substance that mixed with the water was an impure substance, if even one of the qualities change, that's it. It's out the window. You can't use it. The second situation now is, what if something impure mixed? We're still under this category of something najas mixing, something impure mixing, but none of the three qualities that we mentioned, the smell, the taste, the color, none of them changed. What is the outcome now? The outcome is two possibilities. The first possibility, or will be dependent on two possibilities. The first is that if the quantity of water is small, then you can't use it. If it's a large quantity of water, then you can use it, right? To give you an example, we said something impure. So now let's say, for example, I'm carrying a jug of urine and I pour it in a swimming pool. That's considered small quantity of water. There's no precise measurement of small quantity. Some scholars say it's 15 by 15 at least. You can just determine. A regular swimming pool would be considered a small quantity of water for something impure mixing in. Some scholars say 20 by 20, some say 10 by 10. All of these are different estimates of what's considered small. But generally, if it's a small quantity of water, a very small pond, if something impure mixes in it and it doesn't change anything, you can't use it because the quantity of that water is small. Now, same thing, I have that jug of urine and I pour it in the ocean, right? I poured it in the ocean. Now, the beach that we're at, here's the question for you. Ready? I have that jug of urine. I poured it in the ocean. We already said we could use ocean water. We already covered that. That's good. But now we're getting into this situation where impurity is mixing in that ocean. And the beach that we are on, it turns yellowish. Can I use that or not? The ocean is considered a large quantity. Can I use that or not? The ocean is considered a large quantity. I have a no. I have one yes. I want you to think about this structurally. Remember the first thing we said, that if any of the qualities change, then you don't even get into the quantity of the water, right? So if any of the qualities change, if the beach around you somehow changes by one bottle, now again, obviously these are made up situations. It's not like one bottle is going to change the entire ocean, but just around you, right? If any of the qualities of that water changes, ocean water is salty, so that's already a natural quality of it. We're not going to determine whether that's changed, but if any of these change, then we don't even get into the discussion on quantity. That's why that discussion wasn't first, right? The discussion on quantity only comes in when nothing changed, right? Now I take that bottle of najasa, that bottle of urine, I poured it in the swimming pool. Nothing changed, right? Nothing changed, but it's mixed with najasa. Now I see the quantity. Small quantity of water, nah, I can't use it because najasa was mixed. It doesn't matter if something changed or not. Large quantity, yes, you can use it. So now I take that bottle of urine, I poured it in the ocean, nothing changed in the ocean, right? We go to our quantity determination, large versus small. It's a large body of water, nothing changed, we're good to go. We can use it. You see how this is done? This is all systematic, right? So we need to process it in our mind in that way. That number one, the first thing we're going to look at, the first thing is our scenario. It's najasa, something impure mixed with water. The first thing we're going to question, the first question we should ask ourselves is, are any of the three qualities of the water changed? If any of the three changes, automatically no, that water's out the picture. You can't use it for wudu. We got to find a different solution. Now, nothing changed. Nothing changed? Okay, let's go to our discussion on quantity of water. Is it a small quantity? If it's a small quantity, no, you cannot use it. Is it a large quantity? it's a large quantity, yes, you can use it because nothing changed. If something changed, then you would have stopped at question number one. Okay, so you see why I said this is an entry-level class, but there's a lot of content. There's a lot of discussion because you need to understand it in that format in your mind for you to be able to, number one, embed it in your mind. Number two, to be able to recall it after this, 5 minutes of discussion on the topic. Okay. Now we will do one more mas'ala, one more scenario or situation, and then we will open it up for Q&A. This is number 5. If something tahir, something pure mixes with the water, right? What's the situation now? So all that discussion that we did, categorize it under impure mixing with water. Now what we will categorize it with something pure mixing with the water. Remember, we said impure and pure is determined by Islamic law, not something simply as this is dirty, that's not dirty. Rolling in mud is dirty. It's not impure according to Islamic law. So it's not going to affect your water in the same way for wudu as mixing urine in that water. Now, we are not talking about what's recommended. Obviously, if there's dirt mixed in your water, avoid drinking that water. But we're talking about what you can use for wudu. Obviously, if you have I keep saying obviously, if you have a bucket of water mixed with dirt and you have the sink working in your house, you want to use the sink water. You don't want to use dirty water. But that water itself is pure for wudu purposes, right? If it doesn't change immensely, as we'll discuss, if it doesn't change the qualities immensely and stuff. Which means if the sinks and everything stops working, you can't go to tayammum or a secondary thing until you exhaust all of your pure resources that are permissible to use for wudu. So now, this scenario that we are starting, if something pure or clean, the substance is tahir, it's pure or clean, like a soap bar, right? Soap is considered clean, mixes with the water. What do? Number one, if none of the qualities change, you can use it. Very simple, right? What's the 3 qualities of water? Smell, taste, color. We did that a little earlier. If none of these qualities change, you can use it. Let's say there's a pond, and in that pond, I take an Irish Spring soap bar and I throw it in there. Nothing in that pond changed. It still looks the same. I can use it for wudu because none of the qualities changed. Number 2, if the qualities change slightly, so you have that body of water, if the qualities change slightly, but it's still mostly water, right? It's not changed into a different substance, you can use it, right? So if it's still mostly water, just, you put that soap bar in there and it slightly affected the color of the water, made it a little whiter instead of clear, right? Instead of clear, it made it a little whiter. You could still use it because it's mostly water, changed lightly. Number 3, if the water changed immensely and it's no longer water, you can't use it. To give you an example of this, let's say I have some sort of juice, right? Let's say I have juice. I have a gallon of juice. I go in this big reservoir and I pour, or not even a gallon, but I have a lot of juice, and I start pouring gallons and gallons of juice in there to the extent where that reservoir becomes juice, right? I can't use that for wudu because it's no longer water. It changed immensely. Or, I put so much soil in there that it becomes mud, right? I can't use that. It's no longer water. It's become mud now, right? So if it's changed to an extreme level or changed immensely, that it's no longer water, even if the substance is pure, you can no longer use it. Right. So to recap, we're done here. We're stopping at these 2. We're going to continue from number 6 tomorrow. If something impure mixes with the water, you have a different outcome. Something pure mixes with the water, you have a different outcome. If something impure mixes with the water, and if any of the 3 qualities change, you can't use it. We're talking impure substance, water, any of the 3 qualities changing? No, hard no. If none of the 3 qualities change, your discussion turns into quantity. Small body of water, no, even if nothing changed, right? Whereas for number 5, something pure, if it's a small body of water and none of the qualities change, you can use it because the substance that mixed was pure, right? So you see the difference here? Impure substance, small body of water, nothing changed, you cannot use it. Pure substance, small body of water, nothing changed, you can use it, right? So this is why we are differentiating between impure and pure. All right, we will end with that. Let's open it up for Q&A. That is not, it's almost 7 o'clock. Like I said, these will be an hour-long session. Tomorrow, ideally, we'll probably finish a little earlier. We have an interfaith session tomorrow at 7. But every day, 6 o'clock, inshallah, sharp, we will try to begin. Again, these are recorded, so if you miss anything in the beginning, you can catch up. But ideally, you want to catch the class from the beginning. Let me end the live stream and let's start Q&A if anybody